Hi there, I'm Sashi Sivram Krishna and welcome to my course Macroeconomics, a Modern Money Theory Perspective. We are in part 1 of the course Macroeconomics and Money. In lecture 6, we will look at the Keynesian view. The trigger for the Great Depression in the 1930s was actually a stock market collapse, which happened in 1929. At that time, the classical economists believed that the market system would self-adjust and the US economy would gradually come out of the recession. It was John Maynard Keynes who argued and proposed a theory to show that this might not actually happen and the economy might have actually reached an equilibrium with unemployment. Once an economy is at equilibrium, it needs an external push to restore full employment. This was Keynes's major argument. The pictures here show the situation in the United States. It can easily be seen how poverty was widespread, not only in urban areas but in agriculture too, in the countryside. And the person on the right was John Maynard Keynes, who, as we discussed in our last lecture, was actually the person who laid the foundations for macroeconomics. Keynes argued that a new approach was required to the study of market failure on a grand scale, or what we call as macroeconomics. This new approach would then be able to understand the cause of the Great Depression as well as the policies required to pull an economy out of such a recession or depression. He developed a theory of the macroeconomy by considering the aggregate level of output, or what he called as Y, as the sum of various components of aggregate expenditure. These components include consumption expenditure by households, which is C, investment spending on real capital goods by firms in the private sector, or what we call as I, net government spending, that is government expenditure less taxes, plus the level of net exports. Net exports here include the exports of the country, or X, less its imports, M. This is the basic equation of the Keynesian model, which simply states that the level of aggregate output in an economy is equal to the sum of various components of aggregate expenditure. Keynes argued that a fall in aggregate expenditure can actually induce a recession or a depression. This fall in aggregate expenditure might be triggered off by something like the stock market collapse, which happened in 1929. What is more important here is that there is nothing within the system that automatically or endogenously restores the level of consumption spending, investment spending, or net exports back to the original levels so that full employment is restored in an economy. If you think about it, during a depression, one might actually expect consumer spending to fall. This happens because households begin to feel insecure about their futures as people around them lose jobs, so that they might actually begin to save more and spend less. Similarly, business confidence is at a low and firms might cut back on their investment spending. Now, it is possible that a government might actually curtail imports so that net exports increase. Going back, we saw that if net exports increase, the level of aggregate expenditure in the economy increases, and so does the level of aggregate output. This is what the United States actually did in the 1930s. They began to impose tariffs on their imports so that the net exports would increase. But the benefits of this was short-lived. Why? Simply because in a short period of time, other countries began imposing tariffs on US exports. In the end, net exports across the world began falling back to their original levels, but with a big difference, because both exports as well as imports had fallen. Global trade collapsed, and this was bad for the whole world. Keynes therefore believed that the only component which could come to the rescue of an economy was government spending, or perhaps a reduction in taxes in order to increase the level of aggregate expenditure and pull the country out of a depression and restore it to its original levels of full employment. This is why state intervention was seen necessary by Keynes in stabilizing an economy, not just in a situation of recessions or depressions, but in any occasion where an economy might go below the levels of output that correspond to full employment levels. This was Keynes's major argument.